In this video, we will cover everything that you need to know to set up and run a US LLC as a resident of Dubai and the UAE. So I use a US LLC as my main operating company for one part of my business while living here in Dubai. So you might be wondering, first of all, why am I doing that? Second of all, how did I set this up? And third of all, what sort of obligations do I have to the US? And number four, what kind of tax obligations do I have, first of all, to the US and to the UAE? Like, how does this all work? So if you're wondering about all of these things, then this video is for you. I'm going to give you all the information that you would ever need as someone looking to run a US LLC in Dubai, or even if you've never considered using a US LLC before, after watching this video, you might just consider that. First of all, why do I use a US LLC? Now, I've made more detailed videos on this channel. If you just search for US LLC Tuomas on YouTube, you should find them. But just to recap, number one, I use a US LLC to get US payment processing. And number two, I use it to get US banking. The big problem you will have if you run a UAE company, which I also have, but that's mainly to get my visa and things like that, is that you might get some issues with payment processing. I run a coding course business over on my other YouTube channel, and what often happens is that people are simply not able to go through my checkout because their cards get declined, because for some reason all of these credit cards companies still don't like their customers being charged from UAE companies because it's perhaps flagged as a higher risk or something like that. So that literally led to me losing thousands of dollars on these declined payment. So I set up a US LLC, which is a US registered business, to get over this, because most credit card companies, they're used to their customers' cards being charged by US companies, because pretty much every company in the world, like a big company, is a US company. So even though it cost a bit of money to set up, which we'll go over in a second how much that cost, I've made so much more money back because all these payments from my customers are now going through. And the second reason is US banking. Now, for certain situations, especially when I'm dealing with other US businesses a lot of my customers are in the US. It's just easier when I'm able to receive money on my US bank account. I have a Mercury bank account with my US LLC. By the way, if you have one and you're looking to set one up, you can use my referral link down below to get a free $250 when you set that account up. So those are the main purposes. Now, how do you set this up? Again, I've covered this in a lot more detail in a separate video, which again, you can find on the channel. But just to recap, the first thing you need to do is choose your state. For most LLCs, if you're a non-US resident, you will choose Wyoming, simply because the laws in Wyoming are set up in such a way to make doing business the easiest. Almost everyone chooses Wyoming. After that, you're going to need to get what is called a registered agent to act as the official representative of your business in the US. Then you'll have to pick a name and file your LLC online on the website of the state. You will also need to get a physical US address, which will essentially just be a mailing address for your business. And you will need to apply for what is called an EIN, so an employer identification number. Now, if you don't have a US social security number, which if you're watching this as a UAE resident, you almost certainly don't have, that can be a bit of a tricky process and it can take a bit of time. So for that and many other reasons, what I would actually definitely recommend is that you don't do this directly from abroad, but rather you use an agent that is already in the US that can do all of this for you. The one that I use is called Doula. Now, Doula are the paid sponsor of this video, but I use them myself long before they even reached out to me, and now we became partners and things like this. Now, you don't have to use them. You can do all of this yourself, but if you do it yourself, you want to be extremely certain that you're doing everything correctly. You fill every single form directly. And by the way, they won't tell you all the things you need to do. You also need to figure that part out yourself. And all of this is just going to waste a bunch of time for you. And most likely, even if you do all of the correctly, like you think you do it correctly, you're still going to end up making mistakes that are going to cost way more than what you would pay for someone to do it. But I found a lot of information from Doula, and when I cross-check a lot of it with the actual law, it always matched, and I was very confident that this is actually correct information. So this is essentially a service that I knew that I can trust. Like, the people there seem like they actually know what they're doing. And for almost 2 years now, they have been taking care of everything. Like, whenever there's a form that needs to be filled, they just send me an email where they just ask for the information that they actually need. You don't need to actually go out there and fill some IRS form or anything like that. And if you're wondering how it works, they essentially have a couple of different plans. First of all, they have the starter plan, which is everything that you need to start your business. And that starts at only $297 a year. But what I would recommend is the Total Compliance Max or the Total Compliance plans. And the reason why is that while the starter plan gets your business started, you need to also keep it 100% compliant. So the Total Compliance plan will include all your business tax filings, both at the state level as well as the federal level with the IRS. But for me as an entrepreneur, ultimately my time is my valuable asset, which is why I have gone for the Total Compliance Max plan, because this one includes not only all of the filings that you need, but also a dedicated bookkeeper. So the Total Compliance Max plan is really the done for you solution if you really value your time as an entrepreneur and you just want to spend your time making money, and Red Doula handle all of the back end and the financials for you. And whichever plan you go for, you can use my link down below in the description to get 10% off. Now, the next question you're probably asking yourself is, how does this work for taxes? Does this mean I have to pay taxes in the US now? Well, the great thing about the US LLC for non-US residents is that you're not going to be liable for taxes in the US. That's sort of the whole point and the big reason why many specifically non-US entrepreneurs are using US LLC. So let's now go over all of the taxes, all the types of income, and where they're going to be taxed, and how if you run a US LLC from the UAE. And by the way, obvious disclaimer, this is not tax advice. I'm not a tax advisor. This is just my interpretation of the law. So in terms of your general business profits, unless you have what is called effectively connected income, which you can read about right here on this article, for example, is basically any income that you earn while actually physically running this business in the US. So if you're just running this from Dubai, you're basically not going to have any effectively connected income unless you have full-time employees in the US or what I call regular contractors. So like major contractors for your business are physically working from the US. Any income derived from them might be considered effectively connected income, or any dividend investment income from shares or property in the US. So the whole point of using a US LLC as a non-US resident is that you're going to avoid any US connected income. And if you don't have any US connected income, all your profits are going to be tax-free in the US. Now, what about the UAE? Well, the UAE has what are called management and control rules. Now, this is something that most people don't consider. Just because you register your company outside of the UAE doesn't mean that you're not going to be liable for the UAE 9% corporate tax. Now, the UAE corporate tax only applies for businesses that earn revenue above 3 million dirhams a year, so around $816,000 a year. So if you earn below that in revenue, you're also not going to be taxable in the UAE on any of your profits. So you could use this setup, and I personally use this setup to pay 0% tax in the US and 0% tax in the UAE. I know my previous videos, a lot of people commented like, but isn't the US LLC a pass-through entity? So how can it be taxed as corporate tax? Well, the thing here is that the US LLC is what's called a pass-through entity, meaning that it cannot actually like make profits. All the profits of the US LLC are automatically added to the tax returns of the owner of the US LLC, but that is only for US tax purposes. For UAE tax purposes, UAE tax law does not recognize pass-through entities. For them, any organization is a company just like any other company. So it creates a situation where the profits of the US LLC are not considered US company profits, because this company for the US tax purposes is a pass-through entity. So they just pass through directly to the UAE resident owner. But for UAE tax purposes, any profits that the company makes are actually company like business profits. So that is why this US LLC is still going to be taxed as a corporation, like any corporation, for UAE tax purposes, but not for US tax purposes. Now, what about the dividends that you pay from this US LLC to either yourself, if you're the owner, or your UAE company, if you have it as like a holding company like I do? Now, for the purposes of UAE tax, if you pay them as dividends to yourself personally, the UAE does not have any dividend tax, so that's going to be taxed at 0%. However, many people have asked me, what if you have the UAE company as an owner? Aren't the dividends that the UAE holding company received then taxed at 9%? So doesn't this create like a double tax? Well, no, because we can see right here on the UAE tax law that dividends that are paid from a resident company, so if this US LLC is also a resident in the UAE, that is going to be exempt from corporate tax, specifically to avoid double taxation, because presumably you've already paid UAE tax if it is due on those US LLC profits. So no, it is not going to be double taxed. Now, what about US tax? Again, you might think that there might be some withholding tax when you're paying dividends from a US company to outside of the US. But again, here, because for US tax purposes, the US LLC isn't like a corporation, like a C corporation, for example. Because remember, for US tax purposes, the US LLC is a pass-through entity, and these pass-through profits, what are called distributions for US tax law, are not taxed the same way as dividends would be, so there is no withholding tax in the US. Now, the only place where you will be taxed in the US, if you again have this effectively connected income, or if you're earning your money in, for example, royalties from US companies. So a common example of this is AdSense income that you earn from Google, which is a US company, specifically from US viewers, is classed as US sourced income. And because the US and the UAE do not have a tax treaty, any AdSense income that gets paid to your UAE resident US LLC is going to be taxed in the US at 30%. But this is no different whether you had a US LLC or a UAE company, or whether you were paying it to yourself personally, because these royalty withholding taxes are based on where the beneficial owner of the company receiving it is resident, not where it is registered. So again, many people have said, can I not just set up a US LLC to get around the US 30% withholding tax on my AdSense? No, you cannot, because it is based on where that company's beneficial owner is tax resident. Now, what about reporting requirements? On the US side, there's a couple of forms that you have to fill, specifically the pro forma form 1120 and the foreign owner report, which is the form 5472. Again, if you're doing it yourself, be very careful to fill them on time and do it properly, because if you don't, the penalties can go up to $25,000. We can see this directly from the IRS. A penalty of $25,000 will be assessed for any reporting corporation that fails to file the form 5472. And it's not only that, but if the failure continues for more than 90 days after notification, an additional penalty of $25,000 will apply. Which is again why I would recommend using a service like Doula, because they just do it for you. They just let you know, okay, we need this information for this form, and they just send it and they take care of it. You also need to annually pay the state fee and send what is called a beneficial owner report. Now, this is new as of January 2024. You essentially need to report who is actually the owner of this US LLC to the US government. Now, I know many people might not want to do that, but that is just how it works. And in terms of UAE reporting, again, you need to remember that even though this company is registered outside of the US, if you operate it, as in you manage and control it from the UAE, you still have to, first of all, register for corporate tax, like you would need to register any UAE company, and you will need to pay corporate tax if you earn above that small business threshold, and the corporate tax payment is going to be due within 9 months of the end of the financial year. So that was a lot of information, but it should cover everything that you need to know when it comes to running a US LLC from the UAE. I previously made a video on specifically how I structured all of this and why this specific structure, where having a US LLC with a UAE company while living in Dubai, is such a great structure, and why so many people use it. So if you're interested in more details on that, I highly recommend you watch this video right here. So with that said, I will see you in the next one.